broadcasting to the Mediterranean coast, all 500 kilometres of it. This is Bay Radio.
Dougie Mac here for a Thursday afternoon, and as promised, I'm here with a special guest today, and we welcome back Dr. Margo Livingstone. Hello, Margo, how are you?
Hi, Dougie. I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me back. It's lovely to be here.
It's been a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, it was actually the beginning of March because I remember I was listening to what we talked about last time, and it was actually the very beginning of lockdown when we first started talking about coronavirus. So a lot's changed since then.
It seems like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, it was months and months, yeah.
And, well, last time we weren't face-to-face either. You were somewhere else, and we did it via Skype, didn't we?
That's right, yeah.
So, yeah, nice to have you along.
No, it's great to be in the studio. I love it.
So what have we got? I mean, give us an update. There's so much has happened. I mean, where'd you start?
I know. Well, I mean, I just wanted to cover a couple of things today because today's global figures, right? We're talking worldwide. The number of infections is more than 20.6 million, but that's around the world. And the number of deaths is 749,000 around the world. So when you think of the population of the world, it's not a massive figure.
Exactly.
And they're not publishing other data like what would be the seasonal flu at this time, what would be cancer deaths or deaths from other causes. So I know that people locally here in Spain will be worrying slightly about the fact that there's been increased cases in the last few weeks. In the UK, the cases have exceeded 1,000 infections for the second consecutive day, but there's only been 77 deaths recently. Spain has registered 1,690 infections in the last 24 hours, and I'm talking today, so over the last 24 hours, which didn't include Madrid. But many of these cases are imported cases, so the people have come in from somewhere else. And secondly, the cases that are being proven positive now tend to be young people. So there's a complete and utter shift in the dynamics of the infections. So what happened at the very, very beginning was that people were getting tested if they had symptoms of the disease or if they were hospitalised or attended hospital. And these people tended to be sick. And they would sometimes be admitted to hospital and sometimes enter intensive care and die. And the average age of infection then was greater than 65 years old. So what they've been doing now is they've been testing the people that they're testing now. So these figures about supposedly second wave, it's a bit of a dichotomy because they're testing a lot more people now. Like I said, originally it was very specific who they tested. And nowadays they're using a PCR test, which is a polymerase chain reaction test, and you get a nasopharyngeal swab. So somebody will put a swab into your nose or your sides of your cheeks inside your mouth, and they will put it in a sterile container, and that goes off to the lab and gets made into your DNA. So your DNA from your cells of your skin get transferred into DNA, and then they run this polymerase chain reaction, which is called PCR, and that then determines if you have antigens for coronavirus. Now, there's an antigen, which means that it's a protein, it's part of the actual viral structure. So if you're positive for a PCR test, it means that you have got a current infection. The virus particles are in your DNA, that they're in your bloodstream. So that's a positive test. Now, it doesn't mean you're sick, right? And I'll just talk about the second type of testing, and then we'll go back to the numbers and how they can be slightly misleading. The second type of test is an antibody test, and that's done via a blood sample. So you would take the blood from somebody and you would send it to the lab, and that would be used for serological testing. So that would be a very, very old method of checking whether there's any antibodies in that blood sample against specific bacteria or viruses, and this would be against coronavirus. So you're looking specifically for antibodies if you have a blood test. Now that means that you have had coronavirus. It means that you're not sick right now, and it could have been 3 months ago you could have had it. It could be anything up to a fortnight ago, because it takes 10 to 15 days to create the antibodies. The antigen, if you've got a current infection, they'll be there right now, the antibodies will not arrive until after you've been infected for at least 10 days, okay? So the blood test is to determine whether you've had an infection, and technically and normally you would be immune from that, ever getting that again. Now, the jury is still out because they haven't had enough cases and they haven't been able to test enough people as to whether you get lifelong immunity having had coronavirus. But there's a very interesting study came out in the last day or so, talking about cases and how they've discovered that people are proving positive for having had the virus. They've got immunity against the virus, but they don't know when they got it or how they met the virus, and they're young people. So this is the key thing. The key thing is that the people that are being tested right now are tending to be less than 30 years old. So over 40% of the people tested were less than 40 years old in the current in July and August testing. And more than 50% of those people are actually asymptomatic or have very mild symptoms. So it's a completely different ballpark from people going in March with symptoms to the hospital and getting quite seriously ill. And this is what people are worrying about. They go, oh my God, there's so many more cases, but these people are not sick. It's just that there's loads more tests going on, and they're going out into the community. They're testing nightclubs, they're testing kids, and the kids have been reported to be slightly lax with the social distancing and everything like that. So this is a good thing that more people are becoming. It's not that they're becoming positive, it's that they're being shown to already be positive, which means that they're no longer going to be a threat once the viral titer goes down, once the antibodies and the other cells have killed it. So 50% of the people that have been asked recently in Spain, they didn't know where on earth they ever got the virus from. So it's very difficult to trace how they got it. But close contact with one or two people that have got it, you'll understand it's transmitted through respiratory droplets, and hugging and kissing is probably going to pass it on. So in April, when the situation was pretty bad, at the beginning of April, the average age of the positive cases was 60 years old. So that was worrying because those people had no immunity and they were sometimes sick. In July, the average age of the positive cases is 48. So it's much, much lower. Therefore, people are asymptomatic. They're not getting sick. And the majority, as I've said, of the people that they're finding are between 15 and 29 years old. So these are the clubbers, I think. They're talking about clubbers. And so to me, this is a really good thing, Dougie, the fact that they're testing more people. Yes, that looks like there's a rise in numbers, but it's actually a way of showing that they're finding out that people are they're looking at why are these people positive, or they've had the antibody, they've got the antibodies and they're immune, or they've got the virus and they're not sick. So this is interesting for the research side of things. And the study that came out in the last 24 hours has tentatively suggested that 20 to 50% of people actually have cellular protection, which means they don't have antibodies against COVID-19. They have T cells, which is the second half of your acquired immune system. So the T cells are the cells that actually kill viruses. And I've been saying this from the very beginning. I don't understand why they've got these tests against fight antibodies, because that's much more common in a bacterial infection, that you'll have a high antibody titer, and that's what gets rid of the infection. Viral infections get broken down by T cells, and they're vital, and they're 50% of your adaptive immune system. So this study has suggested that even up to 50% of people have got cellular protection against the virus, which is really, really good news. I just want to recap for people to just understand that, yes, there's more cases being reported at the moment round about the world, especially in Europe, Spain, UK, but it's not a cause for worry, because it's nothing like the way it was back in March and April, where people were really sick and they were getting hospitalised and they were ending up in ITU, and there was a lot more deaths. So it's a good thing that there's more cases being reported, and the only reason that there are being more cases reported is that more testing is going on, a widespread PCR testing to determine the antigens for the virus, as I just discussed. So that detects whether there's an active infection, right? And a study just was published recently in a very reputable scientific journal called Science, and it said that 20 to 50% have cellular protection through another form of SARS virus. So I don't know if the listeners will remember or will know that the coronavirus is a severe acute respiratory syndrome virus, okay? It's a coronavirus, which is part of the SARS family of viruses. And 25% of all common colds are caused by another form of 4 different types of coronavirus. So this virus, some people have been terribly frightened of it, but it is quite a simple virus. And the study that's been published in Science is saying that of the people that they've tested that are positive, more than 20%, up to half of them, have got protection, cellular protection, which is T-cell protection, and antibodies, but mostly T-cell protection, which is the part of the immune system that kills viruses specifically. And it's because of cross-reactivity with previous cold infections. And the good thing is that this is only just coming out because researchers have got enough samples to test. They've got enough people that have had the virus. They've got all these people that are being tested positive now, and they can take blood samples and samples to test in the lab. And what they're finding is that there's a really good possibility that instead of us creating a huge 60% of the population of the world having had this coronavirus, which is proving to be a hard thing to get, people are becoming immune from catching it without catching it, which is the best form of possible vaccine you could ever have, because you don't even need to get vaccinated. So these people are have had a common cold virus, and that because the virus it's a coronavirus that causes the common cold, and it's a SARS coronavirus, same as what we have now that causes COVID-19. And they're saying that the structure of these viruses is so similar that when you create an immune response to the cold, you're creating antibodies and T cells against the cold, and they are cross-reacting with the coronavirus of COVID-19, which people are meeting now. So that's why a lot of young people who have very healthy immune systems and strong T-cell responses, they are not showing any symptoms. That's why over 50% of the people that they've tested are asymptomatic. Yes, they're positive, but they're asymptomatic, or they have very mild symptoms, and they might not even know they've had it. So I would suggest to you, Dougie, that there's probably even more people out there that have had coronavirus than we even know about, including ourselves. You know, if you're relatively fit, relatively healthy, you eat fruit and vegetables, you drink plenty of water, and you don't have compromised lungs or a compromised immune system, you know, it may well be that we've already developed immunity to this particular virus. So that's all fantastic news, but you don't get told that on the news, sadly. So I'm here to give some positive news.
That's what we need.
For people living around this area of Spain. And you mustn't worry about the UK system. It will be exactly the same scenario going on there as it is here as well. The countries that have got major problems, like Bolivia and India, they're kind of just catching up with the initial curve. You know what I'm saying? So they're having their worst time now, whereas we're way over the peak now. And if they call it a second wave, it's not something you need to be frightened of. This is my take-home message. Please don't be frightened of what's happening. Yeah, so the herd immunity thing was suggested at the beginning to what we actually needed. But when they did some studies of the Spanish population, there was only an average of about 5% of people over Spain that were actually immune to COVID-19. And it was different in different regions, which is strange. You know, like 14% immunity in Catalonia, whereas less than 2% somewhere else. But so they thought, the researchers were thinking, how could we ever get to 60%? But now the studies are showing that this cross-reactivity between the common cold virus and coronavirus that causes COVID-19 is massively to our advantage. And the second thing I really want listeners to take home is that the antibody test is not the real proof that you're immune, okay? So if you had a negative antibody test, and that might say to you, well, I've never had the virus, but actually you might have had the virus and you've got a T cell response. So you've got an innate immune system which basically meets things head on. When you cut your finger and some dirt gets into your blood or just under your skin, you have an immediate, very ancient response called an innate immune response. And this is where you've got little cells and little growth factors in your blood, and they all home in on that local place and they zap things. It's really, really efficient and effective. And most organisms don't actually get into your bloodstream to create anything worse. If you have, like your mucus in your nose, for instance, would stop most organisms getting past there, and you've got lymph nodes, you've got lymphoid tissue in your throat, which is designed to prevent things from getting into your lungs, for instance. But if you actually get the virus, so the virus gets into your lungs through you breathing it in and actually gets down into your lungs, which is where it wants to go because that's its optimum place to divide. Then your adaptive immune system kicks in, and it always kicks in as a backup. Unless you're immunocompromised, unless you've got problems with your lungs, in terms of your breathing will be quickly compromised. But if your adaptive immune system kicks in, you've got a humoral or an antibody response, which is 50% of that, and you've got a cellular or T cell response. Those are the two halves of the adaptive immune system. And you've actually got some really zappy cells called natural killer cells, which actually go out trying to kill organisms as well. And these three types of cells, T cells, B cells, and natural killer cells, they act in a big gang to just totally destroy organisms. And the T cells are really, really important to kill viruses, as I've said. You've got helper T cells, and you've got cytotoxic T cells. And the cytotoxic T cells are like killer cells as well. And the T cells help the B cells to produce antibodies. It gets a bit complicated. But the bottom line is you need to know that in order to stop being susceptible to COVID-19, you need a T cell response. And this is not being tested for currently. And this is what I've been saying for months. Why are they not testing for T cells? I think it's probably quite an expensive test to develop, and it takes a wee bit of time to prove that it works. But it's a cytotoxic T cell assay that they need to be doing. But I think this is all really good news, don't you? That yes, the cases are increasing, not nearly as badly as in the beginning, and the people that are being tested positive are young, fit, asymptomatic or mild symptoms. Most of them are not ending up in hospital, and certainly hardly anybody is ending up in ITU, so you mustn't worry about it. Social distancing and all of that, keeping your hands really clean is vital. But if we can just get most people immune, then the T cell response is the thing that's going to save you. And also, previous exposure to the cold virus is going to give you cross-reactive antibodies, which could therefore protect you totally from catching it.
Okay. Well, I feel a lot more positive about the whole thing.
Oh, that's good. That's brilliant. No, I wanted to give you positive news and stop people from worrying.
Excellent. Okay. Well, look, is there anything else you need to add?
Well, I would just like to say briefly, I know that we're all being told to wear masks and that it's compulsory and everything else. I did actually a webinar a few days ago talking about masks, and it's the government are telling us to wear masks, and it's really because they're being seen to be doing something. But there is no evidence to prove that masks stop you from catching viral infections. And if you have problems breathing, if you've got compromised lungs, it can actually be dangerous for you to wear a mask. So I'm not saying break the law, don't get yourself fined or anything like that. But if you've got any problems with breathing, you'll know who you are. You've maybe got chronic bronchitis or asthma or lung disease. If you feel remotely breathless, just pull down the front part of your mask, and you can explain, if anybody questions you, that you've, just say I've got asthma or compromised lung disease.
Can you not get a written pass, as it were, from your doctor?
Yeah, I'm sure you can do that.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can do that. I've been speaking to some people in the UK, because there is a bit of a horrible side to this whole pandemic where people have been judging and blaming other people for not wearing a mask, and
that's
why
human nature.
Yeah. and when people have said, look, I've got asthma, they're like, I'm sorry, I didn't really, because it's not obvious, right? It's not really obvious unless you're wheezing. So masks, don't wear them unless you absolutely have to wear them. Throw them away after one-time use, because they actually become a source of infection if you continue wearing them, and just stick them in your pocket and put them back on, and just keep washing your hands really well, and social distancing. That's my take home. But I would love, if anybody would love to have more information, I've written a couple of fact sheets about the virus.
Excellent.
I've got a fact sheet about masks. I've got a fact sheet about how the virus is transferred and the immunology of it, a bit more about what we've talked about today. I'd be happy to send it to people.
Well, perhaps we could put it on the website as well.
Yeah, no, that would be great. So
Excellent.
my website is www.totalhealthmakeover.net, and my email is Dr. Margo, Margo, at totalhealthmakeover.net. So if anybody wants to get in touch, Dougie, I'd be more than happy. If anybody wants some free advice on COVID as well, I'd be delighted to help.
Excellent. Well, we'll make sure we've got your details so that anybody that missed those details, then we can get them via the Facebook page or the website. So
thanks,
excellent.
Dougie. Thank you.
Thanks ever so much for coming in again. It's lovely to see you.
Yeah, it's been really great, and I'm really happy to be able to give positive news to people and tell them not to worry, because everything's good.
It's what we need. Positivity. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Officially the biggest expat radio station in Europe. This is Bay Radio.